The late 19th century was a time of significant change for the United States. The nation, having expanded across the North American continent, began to look beyond its borders with growing imperial ambitions. Industrialization fueled the desire for new markets, and a sense of national pride and exceptionalism encouraged the belief in a duty to spread American influence and values. The crumbling Spanish Empire, grappling with internal strife and colonial revolts, presented an opportunity for the burgeoning American power. Cuba, in particular, became a focal point. Its struggle for independence from Spain resonated with the American public, fueled by sensationalized media reports of Spanish atrocities. At the same time, the strategic importance of the Philippines, a Spanish colony in the Pacific, was not lost on American strategists. Its location, ideally situated for trade with China and Japan, made it a desirable asset in the increasingly competitive arena of global commerce. The stage was set for a clash of empires, one fading and the other on the rise, with the fate of the Philippines hanging in the balance. The sinking of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in February 1898, an event widely attributed to Spanish sabotage despite inconclusive evidence, ignited the simmering tensions between the United States and Spain. The ensuing conflict, dubbed a splendid little war by Secretary of State John Hay, would have far-reaching consequences. The war itself was short-lived and decisively won by the United States. American naval superiority proved crucial, with decisive victories in Manila Bay and Santiago de Cuba crippling the Spanish fleet. On land, American forces, though often ill-prepared for the tropical climate, overwhelmed the Spanish troops. The Philippines, drawn into the conflict by their colonial ties to Spain, witnessed the swift collapse of Spanish authority. Filipino revolutionaries, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, saw an opportunity to finally break free from centuries of Spanish rule. However, the victory over Spain would not bring the liberation they hoped for. Instead, the Philippines found themselves pawns in a new game of imperial chess, their fate now in the hands of a triumphant United States. The Treaty of Paris, signed in December 1898, officially ended the Spanish-American War. This monumental agreement not only concluded hostilities between Spain and the United States, but also redrew the map of colonial possessions, altering the destinies of millions, and ushered in a new era for both the defeated and the victor. The treaty's terms were heavily influenced by the United States' newfound status as an emerging global power, eager to expand its influence beyond its continental borders. For Spain, it marked the end of its colonial empire and its decline as a global power. The once mighty Spanish Empire, which had spanned continents and centuries, was now reduced to a shadow of its former self, relinquishing its last significant overseas territories. For the United States, it signaled its emergence as a major player on the world stage, acquiring Puerto Rico, Guam, and, most significantly, the Philippines. These new territories were seen as stepping stones to greater economic and strategic influence in the Pacific and beyond. The acquisition of the Philippines, however, was not without controversy. The decision to annex the archipelago sparked intense debate across the United States, with opinions sharply divided on the merits and morality of imperial expansion. The debate over its annexation raged in the United States. In town halls and congressional chambers, Americans grappled with the implications of their nation's new role as a colonial power, questioning whether it aligned with the principles of freedom and democracy. Proponents, including President William McKinley, argued that it was America's duty to uplift and civilize the Filipinos, a paternalistic justification for imperial expansion. They believed that American governance would bring progress and stability to the islands, which they viewed as unprepared for self-rule. Others, like Mark Twain, vehemently opposed what they saw as a betrayal of American ideals of self-determination and a dangerous foray into colonialism. The Anti-Imperialist League, of which Twain was a prominent member, argued that imperialism was antithetical to the nation's founding values. The treaty's implications for the Philippines were profound. The archipelago, having fought for independence from Spain, now faced the prospect of rule by another foreign power. The Filipino people's aspirations for self-governance were once again thwarted, leading to widespread disillusionment and anger. The archipelago, having fought for independence from Spain, now faced the prospect of rule by another foreign power. the seeds of resentment and resistance were sown, setting the stage for a bloody and protracted conflict that would define the early years of the American occupation. The seeds of resentment and resistance were sown, setting the stage for a bloody and protracted conflict that would define the early years of the American occupation. The Philippine-American War, which followed, was a brutal struggle that left deep scars on both nations and shaped the future of U.S.-Philippine relations for decades to come. Section 4. The Philippine-American War, a struggle for independence. The Philippine-American War, a conflict often overshadowed in American historical narratives, stands as a stark testament to the Filipino people's determination to forge their own destiny. This war, which lasted from 1899 to 1902, was a brutal and bloody struggle that saw the Filipino people rise up against their new colonizers, the Americans, who had taken control of the Philippines following the Spanish-American War. What began as sporadic uprisings against American rule quickly escalated into a full-blown war, fueled by the Filipinos' desire for self-determination and their resentment towards the new colonizers. The initial skirmishes were marked by fierce resistance, as the Filipinos, under the leadership of figures like Emilio Aguinaldo, sought to reclaim their independence. The war was characterized by brutal guerrilla warfare on the part of the Filipinos, who effectively utilized their knowledge of the terrain to ambush American troops. The dense jungles and rugged landscapes of the Philippines provided the perfect backdrop for these hit-and-run tactics, which often caught the American forces off guard and inflicted significant casualties. The Americans, on the other hand, often resorted to scorched-earth tactics, burning villages and forcibly relocating civilians in an attempt to quell the insurgency. These harsh measures were intended to break the will of the Filipino fighters, but they also led to widespread suffering among the civilian population, who were caught in the crossfire of this brutal conflict. The conflict was marked by atrocities on both sides, with accounts of torture, massacres, and widespread human rights violations. The brutality of the war left deep scars on the Filipino people, and the memories of these atrocities would linger for generations, shaping the nation's collective consciousness and its future struggles for independence. The war exacted a heavy toll on both nations, claiming the lives of thousands of soldiers and countless civilians. The devastation wrought by the conflict was immense, with entire villages destroyed and communities torn apart. The human cost of the war was staggering, and its impact was felt long after the fighting had ceased. Despite their valiant efforts, the Filipinos, outmatched in firepower and resources, were unable to sustain their resistance indefinitely. The American forces, with their superior weaponry and logistical support, gradually wore down the Filipino fighters, who struggled to maintain their supply lines and faced increasing hardships as the war dragged on. The capture of Emilio Aguinaldo in 1901 dealt a significant blow to the Filipino cause, and although sporadic fighting continued for years, the war effectively ended with the American imposition of civilian rule. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in Philippine history, as the nation continued its long and arduous journey towards true independence, a struggle that would not be fully realized until the mid-20th century. Section 5. Key figures in the conflict: McKinley, Aguinaldo, and others. The Philippine-American War was a clash not just of nations, but of ideologies, embodied in the figures who shaped the course of events. This conflict, which lasted from 1899 to 1902, was marked by intense battles, strategic maneuvers, and significant political decisions that would leave a lasting impact on both nations involved. On the American side, President William McKinley, driven by a combination of imperial ambition, economic interests, and a belief in American exceptionalism, played a pivotal role in the decision to annex the Philippines. McKinley's administration viewed the Philippines as a strategic asset, a gateway to Asian markets, and a means to project American power across the Pacific. His policies were often justified under the guise of bringing civilization and democracy to the islands, a notion that was both contested and resisted by the Filipino people. Emilio Aguinaldo, the charismatic leader of the Filipino independence movement, emerged as a symbol of resistance against foreign rule. Born in Cavite, Aguinaldo was a seasoned revolutionary who had previously fought against Spanish colonial forces. His leadership was instrumental in uniting various factions within the Philippines, and his vision for an independent nation inspired many to join the cause. Aguinaldo's determination and tactical acumen made him a formidable opponent to both Spanish and American forces. A skilled strategist and a passionate advocate for his people's right to self-determination, Aguinaldo led the Filipinos in their fight against both Spanish and American domination. His efforts were not just limited to the battlefield. Aguinaldo also sought to establish a functioning government, drafting a constitution, and setting up administrative structures to govern the newly declared Philippine Republic. Despite facing overwhelming odds, his leadership galvanized the Filipino resistance and left an indelible mark on the nation's history. Other figures, both American and Filipino, left their mark on this tumultuous period. These individuals, through their actions and decisions, influenced the course of the war and the future of the Philippines. Their contributions, whether in military, political, or intellectual arenas, were crucial in shaping the narrative of this conflict. General Arthur MacArthur, the American military governor of the Philippines, implemented policies aimed at pacifying the islands, ranging from infrastructure development to the suppression of dissent. MacArthur's approach combined military might with efforts to win the hearts and minds of the Filipino people. He oversaw the construction of roads, schools, and other infrastructure projects intended to modernize the Philippines and integrate it into the American sphere of influence. However, his tenure was also marked by harsh measures against insurgents and those suspected of supporting the independence movement. Apolinario Mabini, known as the brains of the revolution, served as Prime Minister of the short-lived Philippine Republic and provided intellectual heft to the independence movement. A brilliant lawyer and political thinker, Mabini's writings and ideas were instrumental in articulating the aspirations of the Filipino people. Despite being paralyzed from the waist down, his influence was profound and his vision for a free and democratic Philippines continued to inspire future generations of Filipino leaders. These individuals, along with countless others caught in the crossfire of history, shaped the course of the Philippine-American War and its lasting legacies. Their stories, filled with courage, conviction, and complexity, remind us of the human dimensions of this historical conflict. The legacies of McKinley, Aguinaldo, MacArthur, Mabini, and many others continue to resonate, offering lessons on leadership, resistance, and the enduring quest for freedom and justice.